The content presented in this podcast and YouTube show is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your physician or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health or a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard or seen on this show. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of this show are not responsible for any adverse effects resulting from your use of or reliance on any information presented.
Andrea, can you hear us?
Many years ago, I died for 26 seconds. There are so many people in this world that have experienced life events that have led to their sole purpose. Wake Up Your Soul with Andrea will bring you these significant life events that demonstrate how to use those moments for guidance and life purpose. These are our stories. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Wake Up Your Soul. Today's guest is Greer McGuinness, and I'm really excited to dive into this conversation because we're going to talk all things autism, ADHD, because she is a practitioner for autism and ADHD and has a personal story that she will also share with us. Let's welcome Greer. Hi, I'm very excited to have you here because we connected briefly on Instagram because somebody had posted a video about how it broke their heart that they had to break down and they had to give their kid an antibiotic and that they just had to do it. And you kind of commented that, have to, maybe not sort of thing. And people were kind of jumping all over you for saying that. But um, I have 2 kids, 4 and 8. We've never used an antibiotic. And my kids go to school. It's not like we live in a bubble. And I say that just to say that I really do believe that if you stay on top of things, and I mean, the majority of these things have a natural solution. Let's just go back 100 years ago. I mean, obviously, there were people dying of certain things back then, but things have really evolved as far as natural medicine goes as well. We had great medicine back then, but now it's even better. So I do want to talk about that. But let's talk briefly just how you even came to becoming this practitioner for autism and ADHD.
Yeah, and so thanks for having me. And it was very funny that we connected that way because I usually don't comment on people's social media, and I felt bad that this mom was literally being bombarded, and people were making it. In medicine, I'm a practitioner. I've been working in healthcare for 20 years now, and things that I learned 20 years ago has drastically changed over the last 20 years. So it's a very interesting concept of things that I never quite understood fully coming full circle. So I got into working, I wanted to do something in healthcare. I didn't want to be a doctor and I didn't want to be a nurse. And my sister actually was the one that said, "Why don't you become a registered dietitian? There's so many things that you can do as a licensed registered dietitian, and it fits you. It fits your nutrition and holistic, everything." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, I could do so much with this." So
Mhm.
I started working in healthcare and quickly realized that unfortunately the system was working against us as much as they needed us to help educate. And we really were falling behind. We really weren't making a dent. It didn't feel like a dent in what we were trying to accomplish with healthcare. So when I had my son, I thought I was trained in everything. I thought I knew everything. I thought I understood how to raise a kid and nutrition and all that thing. And when my son unfortunately regressed into autism when he was about 19 months, and that kind of catapulted me into a whole different lifestyle and understanding things at a deeper level. Again, being a practitioner from 20 years ago, we were told like autism is genetic. They're delayed from birth with a speech delay, articulation, with motor skills, motor planning, everything that, from birth. But then all of a sudden with this now regression later in life is totally normal. And that was never something that I was taught. When we're looking at children, they're not supposed to regress later in life. That's not part of it. So when I kept going to all these specialists and they kept telling me he was delayed and he has autism now, and I was like, but that wasn't a month ago. Like nothing made sense to me. And so that's where I started really diving into a lot of research and understanding that, oh my gosh, antibiotics could have been a major cause in impacting my son's gut function and his regression symptoms. And that was when I really started going down the rabbit hole, understanding things in a whole different light. And so now I mostly work functionally with kids with autism and ADHD, and I haven't looked back since.
I love sharing stories like this because it's similar to my own experience where I had Lyme disease and I was super sick. And so then it was like, well, why did this even happen in the first place? Because as you start going down the rabbit hole and doing all this research, you realize the majority of the population is going to have Lyme. There's so many different ways that you can get it, but why isn't my body handling this? And so then you just start, yeah, uncovering all these pieces. And then we started to have children, and then it was starting to look into all the things like, okay, well, oh my God, that's toxic. And you start learning all these different things. And yes, all the genetic pieces that the kids can have. And that was a big thing. My daughter, that was like one of the first things I did. I don't even know how old she was when I was cheek swabbing her at home, doing this long genetic test on her, trying to figure out like, what are we dealing with this child? Like, you don't know until you do a test like that where you can understand if they have MTHFR, what are their genetics? Are they going to be able to detox well with certain things? So, do you know what it was that really triggered your son's autism?
I think it was a combo of so many different things, unfortunately. And again, I hate that saying, and people used to say it to me all the time, when you know better, you do better. And I really, that saying bothers me because there's a part of me that's like, I should have known better,
Mm,
but I wasn't educated better. And that's the problem. So between the ages of 1 and 2, my son had at least 7 ear infections.
mm,
And every time it was antibiotics, antibiotics. Not realizing that, and not one pediatrician explained to me, we need to be careful with doing rounds and rounds of antibiotics early on, especially under the age of 2, because it can significantly impact their microbiome development. It can significantly impact their immune system development and their brain development. Not one person ever explained that to me. They just kept saying, "Oh, no, he'll be fine. No problem. Yep, keep going." You could kinda give him a probiotic, it may help. And I'm sitting there, and now that I know this information, and I'm like, I know better, I would have done better, and I wish I could go back in time. So I think for my son, it was a combo of so many different things. It was a perfect storm, and that's typically what I hear from a lot of my families. There's usually like a straw that breaks the camel's back
mhm,
type of thing. And I'm like, "Man, I should have known better." And when I had my second didn't have his first antibiotic till I think he was like 4 or 5, when he got a really bad strep infection that we could not fix and
mhm.
work on our own, which is fine, and that's okay, and that's what this mom was talking about on Instagram when we were talking, where there is a time and place for antibiotics. No, we wanna always be giving antibiotics, and I learned how to treat it, ear infections naturally on my own after having my oldest. And for my youngest, who maybe had it 3 times, I was able to fix that on my own without going to the pediatrician, without needing any medical interventions, and it was easy.
Mhm.
But as a mom doing it for the first time, I was scared, to death. Like I was like, "Oh my god, I hope I do this right, and then I hope I don't." But I realized I just wasn't educated, and once I got educated and I felt more confident in
Mhm.
my knowledge, I was able to do this, and this is where we've fallen so far behind, is we've left out that n natural medicine part of what our parents used to treat. My dad would be like, "Oh, yeah, no, my mom used to treat ear infections at home. My mom used to treat strep at home." There were things that we used to do at home.
There's such a lack too, though, of trusting that mom gut and that intuition, I feel like, because we sometimes will put a doctor on a pedestal. And also just a reminder, like within this podcast, always talk to your doctor first. We are not giving personal medical advice, but I think we can sometimes put doctors on this pedestal where, oh, of course they know more than I do, even though it might not sit right with you. Like, I think there's another way. I think I could handle this, but it's like, oh, they're telling me otherwise. They may not be more correct than you are, right? Like, you actually may know what's best for your child, believe it or not.
So you have this like little thing and it's new and it's shiny and you're just like you're trying to do everything you can to protect it. And
Yeah.
you have this feeling of I'm going to mess up. And
Mhm.
and listen, we all mess up. Every mom has messed up and they have a story that they tell you that this is where they've messed up and it's okay. We want to protect our kids and I think part of it is in society, we have what we call the standard practice of care. So now the standard practice of care is if your kid has a fever, they have an ear infection, they get antibiotics,
Mhm.
regardless of if it's viral or bacterial.
Mhm.
And we essentially just say, okay, but this is all you need, and we fix it one, two, three. But then the problem, what they don't tell you is the aftermath, what it does to the microbiome, what it does to their immune system, what it does is the fact that now they might need more reoccurrence of antibiotics in the future. All these things change, and we just don't get that education.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about microbiome for a little bit because I think for those of us that have had to go down the rabbit hole to save ourselves, save our children, we can understand that. But I think a lot of people listening, this could be their first time even being exposed to just the word itself, microbiome, or okay, I hear that word floating around. I feel like it floats around a lot more than it did 10 years ago. But people are probably like, I don't even know what this means. What does this mean in terms of my health? What is all this?
Yeah. So, believe it or not, in the last 10 years or so, even just research on the brain and the microbiome has like flourished tenfold. Like we've learned more about it in the last 10 years than we ever have before.
Mhm.
So what we know and what we are learning more of is the pediatric microbiome is one of my specialties. And that's what I love to explain and educate to providers and patients is because you have a lot of different factors that can impact just normal development of the microbiome. And this is what we're tending to see more. So, when a baby is born, believe it or not, the first 6 months of life is the most critical. And there are roughly about seven main impact factors that can affect the normal development of the microbiome. The three main ones, believe it or not, is birthing versus vaginal or C section,
Mhm.
breastfeeding and formula, and then when we inoculate their gut with food.
Mhm.
Those are like the three main big pieces. There are other environmental factors that can impact it, but those are the three main things. So, what we're seeing more of, and again, this is not to shame anybody, this is just literally from research statistics that we know of, that we know that kids who are born with moms who have C sections, babies who are born and who are formula fed, or even eat foods earlier on, they have higher risks of chronic health conditions later in life. We just know this information because it's not the norm of development, if we would say that correctly. The norm of development is a vaginal birth, breastfeeding for 1 to 2 years, and then initiating food and feeding after 6 months. All these steps, believe it or not, actually help develop the microbiome in a proper manner. So if you have a baby who is C section, versus vaginal birth. They typically have lower levels of bifidobacterium in their gut, which is essential and critical for breaking down and digesting carbohydrates and producing good bacteria in the gut, especially when they're formula and breastfeeding. So it really starts to maintain that microbiome aspect. Believe it or not, a vaginal birth helps actually inoculate a baby with proteobacteria, which is actually inflammatory bacteria, but it actually helps start to trigger and train the immune system response.
Mhm.
So the first 6 months to a year, that child needs these different types of microbiomes to go up and down so that it can actually learn and train to say, hey, these are bad guys. We need to make sure that we know and we can recognize the bad guys and we can recognize the good guys and start maintaining a better microbiome.
Mhm.
So this is where we start to see a lot of problems with kids with eczema or starting to learn, have chronic health conditions like asthma. So that's learning the pediatric microbiome, and I could talk about it forever. As you could tell, it's one of my favorite things to talk about.
Well, I wanna know for the mothers that did have to have a C-section, they're gonna feel a lot of guilt, right? But, like, what can they do to ease their mind? I mean, obviously, it is what it is. There's certain things we just
There are
cannot
times
undo.
that it happens. Like, listen, I'm not saying, there are times that we have to have a C-section, and that's okay. There's actually a couple of things that I do inform my families about when they have to do that. And I know this might sound gross and disgusting, but we're going to talk about it anyways because it is medical. You can put a glove on and wipe out the vaginal canal and wipe it all over the baby. It's
Mhm.
actually really important that they get all those microorganisms that are down there because it actually starts to help maintain a healthy microbiome. So I've had parents do that and it has worked beautifully. The other thing is we can do a stool test on a child at any age and see where their microbiome is to help push it into the right direction. The great thing about a pediatric microbiome is it doesn't take that much to give and like some supplements to push it into the right direction. And that's the beauty of working with pediatrics is it's not like I have to throw the kitchen sink at them. I could say, okay, we're low here. We need to either focus on these types of foods or we might need a little supplementation just for a short period of time just to get the gut moving and grooving. And then the diet will take over.
I actually have a question because I'm curious about this. Why are, because you're saying pediatrics, why are children able to turn things around so much quicker than an adult? Is it the damage has just gone on for so much longer and the amount of bacterial change that needs to happen is just so much greater? Like, what is the reasoning there?
Because the growth of the pediatric microbiome and development is happening so rapidly
Okay.
during the first 2 years of life. So during those first 2 years of life, there's so much change. Like every month, it's like a new child. Every month, it's like new things are developing and growing. If you really look at a child who comes out of the womb and then a 2-year-old, within 2 years, they come from right being out of the womb to walking, talking, eating. You
Mhm.
know, so that it's such a rapid growth, and so it doesn't take much to push the gut into the body into the right direction. And this is where many times you'll have kiddos who might have allergies or anything or eczema early on, then all of a sudden around 3 or 4, they grow out of them,
Mhm.
and that's just the normal development of the pediatric microbiome into a normal gut microbiome, and their bodies are able to just go into that natural direction.
Yeah. And I can relate and understand all this. And I'll share briefly with my first. Your first you're figuring all this stuff out, but also we had a second layer, we had a surrogate as well. And so I think I had a lot of backup plans. And actually one of them was I knew about, okay, if she isn't able to be delivered vaginally, okay, I knew we could swab inside the vaginal canal. And I knew that would be helpful. But what I didn't think about was like, okay, if our surrogate for whatever reason cannot nurse or doesn't want to, where do we go from here? Obviously, I was planning to do formula, but, we had I think it was goat's milk formula was our plan for something more gentle, and our daughter actually had blood in her stool, I think, by day 3, and she wasn't even taking the formula well from the get-go, and I didn't know any different. It was my first baby, so I didn't know she wasn't taking it well. I was like, "Oh, babies don't eat much. I don't know."
Right.
And then the blood happened, and then I connected with somebody holistic, and we were talking before we started filming, but connecting with Facebook moms and people, but I connected on Facebook with somebody holistic as well. She does Chinese medicine, but she's fabulous. And now that I mention it, I'll see if I can bring her on the podcast. But she was really great. She helped me to figure out exactly what my daughter needed, and it immediately turned around, like you're saying. Like it was very rapid. I mean, within days of starting, we did beta glucans, and immediately it was
Yeah.
resolved.
Yeah, it's truly amazing sometimes when you identify a problem. There and with Chinese medicine, there's so many things that they do differently than we might do in functional medicine just because of their training is different. But all sometimes we're looking at food sensitivities or is it a gut issue or like what happened, like what kind of triggered this response. But with Chinese medicine and functional medicine, we do kind of cross over a lot of the times to see like, okay, how can we come together because they're so little. So we want to make sure that what we're providing for them is safe, especially because a lot of herbals aren't always looked at as safety with, a pregnant or breastfeeding or a newborn. So we're always kind of careful with what we are giving kiddos, but beta glucans, certain prebiotics and probiotics during those first couple weeks could be super helpful.
Yeah, because we didn't get any breast milk at all, which, like, kills me. But I wasn't prepared for that. Looking back, I probably would have had a backup plan and some breast milk from a mom or something like that, but it I can't undo the past, so
Well, it's a tough situation too, because I mean, I donated breast milk before too. And I think it's having to trust somebody else too. And that's a big part of it too. So sometimes people just rather do formula because they just feel it's safer. And that's perfectly fine.
and that's kind of where I got eventually too, was like, "Well, I don't even," and here I am trying to do all the clean things, and I'm like, "I don't even know what's in this other person's breast milk," so yeah, it's hard, but we can figure out what's causing certain things and look at repair. I will say we didn't do so the woman that helped us, she does Chinese medicine, but we didn't do any herbs or anything on her as a baby. Like as a newborn, it was strictly probiotics and prebiotics that she was recommending. But later she definitely recommended certain herbs that were amazing, amazing for all the things. Like I said, we've never had to use an antibiotic. So there were a lot of different ones. There's one I know she recommends for strep, and then there's some just when they have a cough and when they have a fever, and there's just different things. But I think it's really important to look at what is causing something, and if you're able to resolve it in a natural way, like that should be, I shouldn't say it should be because I hate should statements, but it's for me, that's the way I wanna go first is trying to figure out what's the root cause here and am I able to resolve this in a natural way? And then, yeah, like we've said, sometimes you get to this point where you just can't. And I feel that way too about strep. Strep is something that there are natural remedies for, but at some point, sometimes it does not work for some people and the body. If you just keep having these reoccurring strep, I think that's problematic as well. Like, you don't wanna keep getting strep and having that in your body, so
Well, and that's something that happens a lot with my autism and ADHD kiddos. Again, when it goes back to the dysregulation of the immune system, if we had disrupted the immune system early on within those first 2 years of life, what we have found and what I've seen in practice with a lot of my kiddos with PANS and PANDAS, especially
Mhm.
PANDAS with the strep infection, I actually it just happened again where I just had a family who we did a test, the strep markers in blood were off the charts. And the kid is not really having not having a fever, they're not having a sore throat or a stomach bug or vomiting or anything like that. And the mom's like, "Well, his behavior's a little crazy, but he's okay." And I said, "Do me a favor, bring him to the walk-in clinic, have them swab his throat. Let's see what happens." Mom called me back that day, he's positive
Mm.
with no symptoms. So what happens is a strep can hide and evade the immune system if the immune system isn't working correctly. And this is where PANDAS comes about, where the strep infection goes to the brain and really causes so much disruption. It causes inflammation, and we get kids with like tics and stimming, vocal stimming, hyperactivity, bedwetting, OCD behavior, erratic behavior. And, that's where we can do kind of both. We could do conventional antibiotics, we could do IVIG, we could do herbals and try to really kill that strep infection that is lingering in the body that's causing all these issues. But it's unfortunately, some of these kids have had it for so long because their immune system just isn't recognizing it.
Mhm. What let's talk about PANS and PANDAS because I think some people don't know what that is. I know from being in my world and with other like-minded moms, that is something everybody kind of eventually
Yeah.
explores, I think, for one at least one of their children, because it's like, "What is going on here?"
Yeah, so PANS and PANDAS is unfortunately still not recognized in the medical world, which is very unfortunate because we are finding and having more sound data for these children. And what's happening is they can get an infection. Now, I saw this a lot more happening during COVID as well. With PANS is more of like infection, things that we wouldn't naturally think would be like a problem. So roseola virus, Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus. These are very common viruses that kids get early on, or viruses and colds that you wouldn't even know are really a problem until they actually have it. And what happens is sometimes our body and the immune system don't attack and get rid of the infections that come into the system. And sometimes we get bombarded with too many infections at once that the body can't fight it off. So these reactions occur when the body and the immune system are just completely dysregulated and not working the way that it should be. And then these infections take over the body. Very similar with PANDAS, which is more related to just strep infection. And that comes in and impacts the immune system, impacts the brain. And then we have all these very erratic, crazy symptoms for these children where, one minute you have this perfectly. I just actually just watched a video of a mom showing her son having pandas, and it was so sad because this kid, you could see the light in his eyes. Like she had pictures of him like getting an award and hanging out with his friends and joking and sitting down and watching TV, eating popcorn and stuff. And it was like all these snippet videos of like a past year, and then she changed to him now with pandas, and he was doing vocal stims and tics and crying and screaming and banging, like, it was just completely erotic behavior, and my heart broke because this is where we need the education, because this is a serious problem that practitioners need to acknowledge and not just think that this kid needs medication. There's an underlining factor that happened to this child who needs medical support. And it's so sad that so many, even infectious disease doctors, say that this is not real, this is not a thing. And I don't know how we could be that dismissive about
Yeah.
it.
I mean, that reminds me of when I was going through Lyme. God, that was, I'm trying to think, like 15 years ago. And it was the same thing where it was like, I was going to Stanford at the time, but then also a Lyme practitioner. And of course, Stanford's like, this is not real. This is not really a thing. Like, this happens to like 1 in a million or whatever it was. It was just like, this is so rare, so rare. But I actually heard that the doctor that I was going to, I think myself and another patient that I had recommended to him, finally, like, we made him start to open his eyes because it was like,
Right.
"Oh my god, these patients have gone through this Lyme treatment and things are turning around." And for me, I felt like it was very undeniable, and I could see that the doctors were kind of like, "Okay, yeah, okay, this makes sense, but, maybe not." But, like, I have a pacemaker, and I was using it. I had gotten up to almost 30% a day usage, and then when I started my Lyme treatment, at one point, when I was on a certain very particular combination of drugs, I actually got down to 1% usage on the pacemaker. And so I'm like, "How are you guys denying this? How are you denying this?" But okay.
The CDC hasn't updated their Lyme criteria since the 1970s. So they only believe in acute Lyme issues. They don't believe in chronic Lyme. So unless you were bitten by a tick a week or two ago and had the bullseye rash, which only like 20% of people actually ever get, that they'll treat that and say, yes, you had Lyme disease. But if you were bitten by a tick or, from a partner from 10, 15 years ago, and now all of a sudden you're having all these crazy symptoms, and they're gonna be like, "Well, that's not Lyme disease, like, it can't be from Lyme." And it's so crazy that, like, this is why we have branched off groups like Lyme bites and stuff like that, and ILADS, is because these doctors have gotten together and going, "No, like, chronic Lyme is a thing we need to separate to be able to test these patients and be able to help them because this is obviously the problem."
Yeah, it's very it's very much a problem, but it has evolved. I feel like I see it evolving much more now with when I've gone to appointments with doctors and I mention it, they're not like, "Oh, here's another crazy patient." Like, they're like, "Oh, okay." Like, they seem to actually buy into it a little bit more,
Yeah.
versus before. It was like, "Yeah, sure, sweetie." Like, it was just like, "That's not your
I
problem."
know. Well, the problem is the testing. It's a Western blot tube tier, and most people don't pass the first tier. So, like, if you're going to LabCorp and getting blood for
Yeah.
Lyme, the likeliness is you are not going to pass if it's chronic Lyme, and that's why it gets missed so much. So
Mhm.
that's part of the problem, which is why they have other companies that do Lyme testing now and like really looking at what they call the alternative
Mhm.
criteria, and it depends on the amount of bands that you're meeting. And what's crazy is my son, I'm from upstate, which I grew up with outdoor, like an acre of playing in the dirt and the woods. We had loads of ticks. Our dogs had ticks.
Yeah.
And I never thought of Lyme, but when I was going through this process with my son, it was like a test that somebody had said. I think I was watching something a very long time ago from Dr. Klinghardt, who is like this, like, you know,
Yeah. I love him.
and he was like, all my patients have Lyme disease, and he's in Europe, and I'm like, that's so weird that all of his patients would test positive for Lyme. So I was like, let me test my son, and he tested positive for the alternative Lyme criteria, and I was like, oh no, he probably got it from me because we live in an area that does not have ticks or where he would be out being exposed to them. So I was like, this is just freaky. And I was like, I'm petrified to test myself. I still haven't tested myself because I don't want to know because it's just too much. But he probably did get it from me. And I probably, yeah, we hung out in the woods. We partied in the woods all the time. It's so crazy that I never knew that you could pass it on to your child through utero, and it was just an eye-opening experience for me learning a lot about Lyme as well.
And mosquitoes carry it as well, and
Mhm.
white-footed mice, and it's not just ticks that carry it, and yeah, not everybody gets that bullseye rash. I never had that rash, or did I? Like, I could have had it as a child in some weird spot, right, that nobody ever saw,
Yeah,
and it wasn't
exactly.
affecting my body, so who knows? But I know I also tested positive for, like, 5 co-infections as well.
That's
So
what happens. It makes you so much more susceptible and that's why they do a lot of those panels with co-infections is because once you start getting those co-infections, it makes you so much more susceptible to bites from mosquitoes and other things that start carrying other types of bands, which is why some of them actually test European bands now too, is because now we're getting and seeing more European bands and Borrelia, Bartonella, and stuff like that too. So we're seeing this more and more, and that's what's becoming more scarier.
but I have to say, for people listening thinking, "Oh my god, I gotta get myself tested. Surely I have it." Like, the majority of us probably do have
Yeah.
it, and the reality is it's never gonna be fully wiped from your body, so you just have to support yourself. I was to the point where I had to use a wheelchair to go long distances. I couldn't walk the mall. I couldn't walk Disneyland. I couldn't walk a lot at certain points in my I couldn't even hold my head up. I got really, really sick at one point. But so I'm just a huge advocate in supporting your body. And yes, I do believe you have to kill off some of the bacteria, but at the end of the day, I think you really have to have a strong support for your body. And like we've talked about, obviously supporting your gut and all the different things and your detox pathways. I mean, that's a whole nother thing. And I actually did a recent episode that was great online. But yeah, I think a lot of people have it. So yeah, don't freak out about it and think you need
The
to
thing
eat it.
you know, we with people and, chronic and it's no different than, like, let's talk about, like, celiac disease
Yeah,
and genetics. Our genetics hasn't changed. Our genetics have stayed the same. It's what our environment has done. It's changed. Our food has changed, our environment has changed, our stress level and everything has changed. So if we can mitigate a lot of that environmental piece, we're
that's
gonna
that.
be okay.
Yeah.
I know sometimes we can get off on tangents when we talk about these things, and when you're talking with people who have chronic health conditions or dealing with it, it makes it seem very scary, but here's the thing is most people are not gonna deal with this. Most people are going to make big changes in their life or live a healthy lifestyle, so these things won't ever affect them.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's bad luck, and the perfect storm where we just are those types of people who, and I always try to look at the silver lining. Things not the greatest things happen to us in our family, but look at where we are now and look at what I'm able to do now and educate and help so many different people. This is my silver lining.
Mm.
Same for you is like you had all these horrible things happen to you in your life, but you were able to overcome them and now explain and help other people who might be in the same boat. So, don't think that this is, we're two moms who have had to deal with a lot in our lives that most people will never have to deal with in their lives. And that's a blessing, but it's also just helpful for other families who might be going through it that need that support as well.
Well, I totally agree with your silver lining theory because I've always said that nobody is going to help somebody more than somebody that actually has had to live in the darkness and they have been able to see the light through it.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes there's people that are trying to share expertise on topics and things, but they haven't lived it and they haven't gone through it. And it just makes it very unrelatable and it's hard to lean into that. And so when somebody has lived through it, it just feels much more valuable, I think, for sure.
I
So
feel like you have a different viewpoint of a lot of it, and especially me being an autism mom, when I see influencers and stuff talk about things that should or shouldn't affect our lives, it's like, well, geez, all the stress is now gone just because this influencer said I shouldn't be stressed about it and has no idea what my life is like. And, that's where it's very frustrating and invalidating because everyone has different walks of life when it comes to something like this. Like my son now is a low support needs kid, but I have friends who have children with high support needs, autism,
mhm,
don't live the same life.
mhm.
And I would never tell somebody that their life is, easy or not that big of a deal or they should count their blessing. There's just so many things that people say without thinking. I always try to put myself in someone else's shoes and not judge them at all because no two people walk the same life every day. So you don't know what people go through.
That was one of the biggest takeaways for me, and going through all that I went through was really looking at that piece of like, and I always was, even as a child, I actually was that person. And it's somewhere along the way, I don't know if it was my mom or teachers or whatever, but it was like, put yourself in that person's shoes. And then how does it feel? And just having that reverse role. And for me, when I became super ill, actually with ulcerative colitis at the time, I mean, I remember parking my little butt down on the floor in a Home Depot, and some guy came and said something super snarky to me about me being in the way, and it was like, I was so happy to just be out of the house, and I thought I was out of the way. I think I was sitting by, like, a magazine rack or something, like, I did my best, but, like, I needed to sit down in that moment. I was weak and I couldn't keep going, but he had no idea, and so I do always, I shouldn't say always, because I 'cause I'm human and I'm not perfect, but I definitely try to, at some point, come around to having that reflection of, "Okay, Andrea, you don't know where this person is coming from. You don't know what kind of day they've had. You don't know what kind of life they've had," and trying to understand what possible reason can somebody have for making the choices that they're making, and just giving them grace and letting them be.
Yeah. No, and I think I try to do that with a lot of medical professionals who I see on Instagram and stuff. And even the people that were coming after that poor mom who was a practitioner in that post about the antibiotics. And it's like they just don't know.
Yeah.
They're not like, nobody explained. Everyone praises antibiotics because they were an amazing invention. They really were. They saved a lot of
Yeah.
lives quickly.
Yeah.
However, nobody has ever talked about the damage and the issues that it can cause. And
Mhm.
that's the problem is the education a lot of the times is only one-sided.
Yes.
So I can't fault somebody because they don't know, and it's because they're not educated. I went to school for 9 years. I have a master's degree. I have spent thousands of hours reading and researching and looking at stool test kits and stool samples of kids and to understand this better.
Mhm.
Nobody's gonna do that.
Mhm.
So that's where we have to kinda take a step back and go, maybe I don't know everything and maybe I just need to like listen and see and not judge because obviously if it is a problem, then we need to talk about it and just to understand both sides so we can have clarity. That's all.
Yeah. I will say the post we're talking about was a little dramatic.
A little bit, a little bit. I agree. However, in Instagram, you never know what's gonna blow up, to be completely honest. So this mom was probably just doing it for her own audience, and then it blew up. And in retrospect, for everybody understanding, to be honest, it was, a mom who had to give her child antibiotics because the child wound up with a UTI, but the mom didn't know that. And that's an important thing that I think people miss is because she went to the doctor. They didn't she was negative for everything. They did a urine analysis and then they were waiting for the culture to come back to say, should you go on antibiotics or not? And when the results came back positive, the mom said, okay, I have to give my kid antibiotics. And that's what she was trying to just explain. Like, I wasn't putting my kid on antibiotics for no reason. And this was the reason. And people went a little bit crazy on it. But there really shouldn't have been. I think people don't understand how that works. You have,
Yeah.
you can start the antibiotics before the urine culture comes back, but many pediatricians won't do that
Yeah.
until it comes back positive. I think just because she was more of a natural medicine practitioner, she was explaining there's a time and place for Western medicine, and I thought that was great. But yeah.
And my kids, we've had some, I think, bladder infections. I've never even done a urine culture, but as soon as they tell me, then I stick them on all the things right away. We do homeopathy, and then we do the God, I'm drawing such a blank on it, but it's the
Emails.
yes, the D-Mannose and cranberry and stuff like that, and we start that immediately, and usually I shouldn't say usually, it does, it always works.
Yeah.
But it also depends on your kid. Is your kid gonna tell you when it's burning when they pee or when things are irritated down there? Not necessarily, so I think
Yeah.
and I think with boys, it also can be a lot trickier, right? A bladder infection is felt differently than a
Yeah.
girl's.
And even with my autism and ADHD population, unfortunately, a lot of my kids cannot speak and they cannot tell us what's wrong.
Yeah.
So it's basically a big guessing game of what's wrong. We have to sometimes go by symptoms. We have to go by how they're feeling, how their moods are, and just kind of gauge where we're at with certain things. And that's why we use diagnostic criterias and clues and testing to kind of see like what's going on. Because nothing is black and white with my population, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a very good point with your population and with the kids that are a little less expressive or even nonverbal. I think some of the infections can go a little too long. And then, yeah, I can understand that. So, what are some of your favorite recommendations for people just for wellness, just for keeping up wellness for their child? Maybe keeping up their detox pathways or keeping their nervous system balanced. What are some of your favorite things?
Yeah. So I call it my 4 pillars of detox and things like that. One is making sure that you have clean water. Our water supply in the United States is a lot of times horrific and has a lot of stuff in it. So making sure because we need water. We need to drink water every single day to survive. So trying to just drink clean water, getting a water filtration system and doing clean water is always one of my top things, which is super easy to do. The second thing is food. Our kids consume way too much sugar, way too many carbohydrates and stuff. And so, one of the things we want to focus on is just shifting nutrition a little bit, really focusing on higher protein, lower sugar, trying to get more fruits and vegetables, which I know is easier said than done. Sometimes it's just, relooking and just swapping out a few things.
Mhm.
Okay. It's just making instead of buying the package of muffins that's loaded with sugar, how about we make a muffin? And just making small little swaps is super, super helpful.
Mhm.
Getting outside and getting sunlight. Even if it's cold outside, stick those kids outside. Get them outside in the air, let them touch the ground, and just enjoy just being outside off of the iPads, off of screen times. And with like nutrition, if your kid doesn't eat the greatest, do a multivitamin and mineral supplement. It's super easy to find different types of products. I do have free ebooks, and one is actually a supplement ebook, which gives all my favorite vitamins and mineral supplements to help families find if they need a chewable, a liquid, a powder, a capsule, and getting them moving and grooving with that is super helpful. Because again, not all of our kids are going to eat great, but it's just trying to bridge that gap and trying to get them some better nutrition.
Mhm.
And lastly is just making sure they're pooping every day. That's like one of the biggest things, or at least every other day, because I know a lot of our kiddos are not going to poop every day, but at least every other day. And that's super important with sleep. Chiropractic care is great, which could help with pooping and help with sleeping. So all those things can be really helpful in just trying to start the process in rebalancing your whole entire system.
Where can people find your free ebook?
Yeah, on my website. So everything is the same. Biomedical healing for kids, which is on my website, which is .com. I have an Instagram, a private Facebook group, and I share a heap of information for all my family.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much for being here. I'm sure this will reach a lot of people in the best way. So I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.